Hi guys, welcome back to Taylor, and today I'm going to be showing you how to fly a departure in the Boeing 737. Okay guys, so we're currently sat on the threshold of runway 24 at Edinburgh, and today I'm going to be showing you how to fly a standard instrument departure using the 737-800 systems and how to set it up in the FMC and what modes to use on departure with the autopilot. So we've got the aircraft all set up, engines running, ready to go. So what we need to do is go down to the FMC now and start to program the information in. So this is how it would look when it first starts up. Then we go into FMC here, and we would initially set up the position information, although because I've done a fast start it's already set. So we'd put the origin airport in anyway, because that allows it to kind of cross-check its position. So we put that in here, and then we go to the route. And today we're going to be doing Edinburgh to Newcastle. It's a very short flight, and I'm only going to be showing you the departure. So there's no need to worry too much about the arrival into Newcastle. But we need to start putting the route in anyway. So you can see here on the flight plan that we're going from Edinburgh, which is Echo Golf Papa Hotel, which is already set down here in the scratch pad because we've set it up as a reference airport. And we're going to go to Newcastle, which is Echo Golf November Tango. So we put that in the destination airport section into here. The flight number, which is the call sign basically, which we're going to be putting ourselves down as Taylor 1 Alpha. So Tango Alpha Yankee 1 Alpha, and that goes in this section here, and the runway is 24. There we go. That's the first page of the route information. There's a second page here which we'll come to in a minute, but first of all we need to work out what our departures and arrivals are going to be. So you can see here on the flight plan that the departure that we're going to be flying is the Tala 6 Charlie departure. So what we need to do is go to departures and arrivals here, pick Edinburgh, which is at the top, and the departures, which are on the left hand side. Select runway 24 if it's not already selected, but it is, and then the Tala 6 Charlie departure. And you can see there it's come up in blue dashed lines on the navigation display, which shows us that we've selected something but not activated and executed it yet. Then we go back to the route, and then we fill in the rest of the route. So we're going from the Tala 6 Charlie to Tala, and then we're going to take an airway called the Yankee 96. So we put that in on the left hand side, Yankee 96, and then we go to a waypoint called Nateb after that. So we are going to fill that in here, so Nateb, and I put that on the right hand side here. And that's the entire route. Then we're direct to Newcastle after that. So we go back to departures and arrivals. Now there's no arrival from this direction into Newcastle. So what we'll do, we'll just select the ILS runway 25, and then we'll just join that up in the legs page. Because what you'll see if we go back to the route page now, there's probably a route discontinuity, yeah. And what we'll do, if we go to the legs page, we can check where the gap is, and then we can join this, which is basically the start of the ILS, up to Nateb. And that gets rid of the route discontinuity. We can actually activate that, and what we'd normally do in real life is we'd do a route check between the two pilots, make sure both are happy that the correct route's in, and then execute it. We'll assume that that's done, and that's basically the route in. So what we can do then is brief the departure that we're going to fly. So we're going to be flying the Tala 6 Charlie departure, which takes us straight ahead to the uniform whiskey. Which is an NDB, which if I go to the plan view here on the navigation display, we can actually step through the points and make sure that we've got everything incorrect. So here's the departure up on the screen. So you see it initially takes us straight ahead to a waypoint called Uniform Whiskey, which is in the FMC here and on the chart as well. And the code for that is 368. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that we've got that tuned in on the center pedestal, which I'll show you in a second. After the Uniform Whiskey, we continue to DME 7 from the India Tango Hotel, which is the ILS frequency, ILS and localizer frequency. and we can actually step through the route to make sure that it's all looking good. So then after that we're going to turn left to 165 and then go to Tala, which is a VOR 113.8, which will make sure we've got tuned in the center pedestal as well. So there we go. So we check this here. So we're going to turn 165, then we go inbound to Tala, which is here, and then on the way there at the 9.5 DME point from the India Tango Hotel, we're going to be 4,500 or above, and we can see that is in the FMC here. And then the next point we need to be DME 13 from Tala at 5,500 or above, and if we step through we can see those points there and they look sensible. And then we go to Tala, which is the end of the procedure, and we can see here there's a warning. It says do not climb above 6,000 feet until instructed by ATC. So we need to be level at Tala at 6,000 feet if we don't receive any further instructions from ATC. So I'm happy that that route is actually in correctly. So we will come out of the plan mode here, go back to the map view, and we will make sure that we've got everything set up on the center pedestal. So 368 is the NDB frequency, and we've got that set into here. We need the ILS frequency of 1089 set, which is in use in both sides, and the VOR frequency of 113.8, which is set in standby on both sides. The reason for having all that set is so that if the RNAV system fails, we can use conventional navigation in order to continue to navigate safely on our route. We also want to make sure we've got our stop altitude, which was 6,000 feet, if you remember the warning. We want to make sure that's set in the MCP here as well. And we will have the runway heading set too. So we're going to have 241 set in the heading selector up here. And that's the MCP set up as we want it for now. The cruise altitude is going to be flight level 150. So we're going to make sure that that's set here as well. And we're going to make sure that that elevation for Newcastle, which is 266 feet, is set in the land out here. And with 250 is close enough for us there. So that's the departure procedure that we've got set up and confirmed. Now what we have to do is worry about our performance. So I've set it up for 100 passengers, and we need to distribute them through the aircraft to enable us to be within limitations. So what I've done is I've set it up on here, and I've got 100 passengers set. I've got 7 in the front, I've got 20 and 36 in the middle zones, and I've got 37 in the forward part of the aft area, which should put us in within the correct ranges. You see everything's green on here, so that's looking all right. So the center of gravity is 19.8 and the gross weight's 58.9. So we'll have that set as well. So what we need to do is go to our init ref here, and then we need to set up the performance information. So we get some of this off the flight plan. So the cost index, which is on the flight plan here, you can see it says it wants us to fly cost index 48. So we'd set that in here. The reserves, which is basically the final reserve, the alternate fuel and the contingency all added up, comes to about 3.5 if I rounded it up. So I'm going to put 3.5 in the final reserve here, in the reserve here. And then the zero fuel weight, I think I said it was 58.9, but we can actually just select that. And the zero fuel weight, yeah, 51.1. The 58.9 was the gross weight. So we've got the zero fuel weight set in here, and 58.8 is the gross weight. That checks, so that's all fine. 150 was the flight level that we're going to climb to. The cruise wind, now normally there'd be a top of climb wind on the flight plan information here, but there doesn't seem to be on this one, so what we're going to do is put the average wind in here, which is 289 at 35. So 289, 35 knots, and we're going to put that in the cruise wind section here. ISO deviation, you can see, is displayed here, which is -6, which we're going to put in the ISO deviation section of the FMC here. and then we're going to change the transition altitude to 6001. The transition altitude is 6000. If we change it to 6001, it doesn't confuse the FMC and transfer us to flight levels too early. Then we go to we're going to execute that and go to the N1 limit page, and this is basically where we fill out our takeoff performance data. So we need the weather for Edinburgh. This is the weather for Edinburgh here, and you can see that the temperature is 8 degrees. So we're going to change that. It says 7 here, so we're going to change that to 8. And that should do a little bit of a recalculation. And the takeoff performance information, we would put it into the iPad here. So our gross weight is 58.8, so we'll remember that. And so if we put in here, Echo Golf Papa Hotel, which is Edinburgh, runway 24, it's dry. The wind, as you can see on the screen here, is 250 at 12, so we need to change that. 250 at 12. And we'll put that in here. The temperature is 8 degrees, so we're going to put that in here like that. And the QNH is 1012, which is already set. We've got optimum 5 auto off. It's 58.8 for the gross weight, and it was 19.8 for the CG. Now normally there will be an area here which would allow you to calculate the takeoff performance on the iPad, but unfortunately I haven't found a way of doing it on here, so we've put it filled in there anyway, and we're going to now put this information into the FMC. So we've got 8 degrees set. Now I'm going to select a 424k takeoff. That should be plenty enough, although it would be nice to have the calculation on the iPad to confirm it, but I'm pretty confident that that should be okay. Then we go to the takeoff screen, and we're going to tell the FMC how much flaps we want. We're going to take off with flaps 5 today, and the center of gravity was 19.8, so we're going to put that into the CG section here, and that will calculate our speeds for us here. So we're going to take 129 for the V1, 130 for rotate, and 140 for V2. We need to set the V2 speed in the MCP in the speed window here. There's 140. And we need to set the trim as well, so 5.75 for the trim. So what we're going to do is set 5.75 here on the trim. So we need to bring this back here so that we've got indicated here 5.75, and you can see that's around about where we want it. So that's the trim set. We need to set the flaps as well, flaps 5. That's what we want. And now we're just going to have a quick scan through and make sure we've got everything set up correctly. So we've got the overhead panel. Its start switches are in continuous, that's all looking okay. We've got the lights set, we've got the seat belts on, the packs are auto, the bleeds are on, we've got the pressurization panel set as well. That's all looking sensible. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Let's have a look at the MCP. So we've got 6,000 set for the stop altitude. We've got the courses set up for if we needed to track Teller. We're going to arm the auto throttle and pre-select LNAV as well, and that's so that we've got it set up for when we actually get going. We've got the auto brake in RTO in case we need to do a rejected takeoff. And let's have a look down here. So we want the transponder on TARA. That looks good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to release the parking brake, and I'm going to hold it on the toe brakes, and we're going to run through the before takeoff checks. So before takeoff checks, config. So the reason I released the parking brake just now is to do the config check. So what we're going to do is push the throttles all the way forward and then back, and what that does is it checks to make sure that the aircraft's in an acceptable takeoff configuration. So if the trim wasn't set correctly, the parking brake was on, or the flaps weren't set correctly, then it would give us a warning, and it hasn't given us any warning there, so I'm happy that that's all set. The flaps, we want to make sure they are 5 with a green light, so we can check over here. We've got the flaps 5 with a green light. That's all looking good as well. So the stab trim, we want 5.75 units. You can see that on the FMC here, and 5.75 unit is set. the takeoff briefing. So we've talked about the departure. We're doing the Tower 6 Charlie departure, straight ahead with a left turn at 7 DME. And that's all discussed. And we've got the packs on, the bleeds are on, so that's all looking good as well. The cabin will say is secure. Then we go to below the line check. So the MCP, we want to make sure that is set. That's looking pretty good to me. We do want to make sure that we've got the MFRA set on here. So at Edinburgh, the MFRA is about 1800 feet normally, so we're going to set something around that just to be close enough. There we go. So we'll just leave it at 1800 there. We want the QNH set as well, 1012, and that's looking fine. So I'd say the MCP is good. So the MCP is set. The transponder is TARA. The strobe lights are on. I turn them on, and the landing lights are on as well. That's all looking sensible. So I would say we are ready to go. What we do want to actually do just before we take off is make sure that the FMCs are set up as we want them. So we've got the pilot flying would normally have the takeoff page selected, and the pilot monitoring would normally have the legs page selected. And what I am going to do while I'm thinking about it is I'm going to just select a slightly slower speed to get around that first corner there of 220 or below, and that will mean that we don't end up going around that corner too fast and overshooting it too much. So that's all good as well. Oh yeah, I'd say we're ready to go, so we can actually start the takeoff. So what we do in order to start the takeoff is initially advance the thrust levers to around 40% N1. So if you have a look when I advance the thrust levers, you'll see that initially we get to around 40%, which I will set up for you so you can see that easier here. So we go to about 40%, which is about there. Then the pilot monitoring would say stabilized, and then we would push toga, and then the pilot flying says set takeoff thrust. And we're good to go. Start the timer as well, don't forget that. And there's 80 knots, which is checked. V1, rotate. Up to 15 degrees at about 2 degrees per second. A little bumpier than I was expecting. Positive rate, gear up. 400 feet, LNAV should be selected, but for some reason it hasn't, so we're going to reselect the LNAV there. And then at 1000 feet we engage the autopilot, and that is command B I think I've got set up there, and then we bug the up speed on the MCP here. So we do that, bug the up speed. There you go. Then we wait for a positive trend vector on the speed, and then we select flap 1. So the pilot flying we call that flaps 1. The pilot monitor will say speed checks, and then select flaps 1. We then wait for it to be above the flaps 1 maneuvering speed, and positive trend vector on the speed again, and call for flaps up. Pilot monitor says speeds checked, flaps up. You see the flaps going up here. Once we're over 3,000 feet over the ground and the flaps are up with no amber light here, we select flaps up, no lights. Or we say flaps up, no lights. And then that's it basically. We've done the takeoff, and the pilot monitoring can then set VNAV, and that will speed the aircraft up to around 220 because that's what we've put in there. Now normally what would happen is you would be cleared above the stop altitude in quite a lot earlier than the talent point. So we're going to say we've been cleared up to flight level 150. We're going to set that here, and we need to make sure that we have taken out the 6,000 feet restriction. You can see the 6,000 feet restriction here. We need to push Alt into vent here until that restriction disappears, and then the aircraft can continue to climb. So there we are, flaps up, no lights. We're clear to a flight level, so we are going to select standard, which changes us over to the standard pressure setting, and then we will do the after takeoff checks, which includes selecting the gear to off, turning off the auto brake. We want to take the start switches to off, not flight. There we go. And the taxi light can go off as well. That goes off when the gear comes up normally. And that's it. So the aircraft's now on the teledeparture, and we have made it our way around the first corner. We'll be happy for the aircraft to accelerate as soon as that restriction has disappeared. So we just now continue on the teledeparture until we get to Tela. We're going to get up to our cruising altitude fairly soon. And that's it, guys. That's how you fly the departure on the 737.